The night glittered with wealth, but all eyes searched for one man, Daniel Gray, the ruthless young CEO who built an empire yet carried the reputation of being too cold to love. Tonight, under the chandeliers of the grandest ballroom, he wasn't just here to impress investors. He had done something unthinkable. He had ordered a date, a woman meant to play his girlfriend for one night only. But when she walked in, radiant and real, the room gasped. Daniel thought it was an act, until a small voice asked, "Daddy, is she my new mommy?" The ballroom glittered as if the stars themselves had descended from the heavens. Crystal chandeliers swayed gently overhead, scattering light across gowns of silk and velvet, across polished shoes and tuxedos that gleamed under the golden glow. Laughter and conversation filled the vast space, blending with the faint notes of a live orchestra tucked neatly in the corner. Tonight was more than just a party. It was the event of the year. Every influential figure was here, investors, celebrities, politicians, journalists waiting to feast on the smallest whisper of scandal. And at the center of it all, standing like a king surveying his kingdom, was Daniel Gray. Daniel, the young CEO of Gray Corporation, carried himself with a cool detachment that only heightened his allure. At 35, he was already a legend, brilliant, ruthless in negotiations, untouchable in business. Every move he made was calculated, every word spoken with purpose. His tall frame, clad in a perfectly tailored tuxedo, commanded attention as naturally as breathing. But behind the sharp lines of his jaw and the unreadable steel of his eyes lay a truth no one here truly understood. He hated these nights. It wasn't the champagne or the small talk that exhausted him, it was the act. The need to play a role for a world hungry for perfection. Daniel Gray had mastered the art of power, but at a cost. Since the loss of his wife 5 years ago, he had built walls higher than any empire. There was only one person who ever saw the softer man hidden behind those walls, his 6-year-old daughter, Emily. She was his light, his anchor, his reason for every breath he took. But tonight, Emily wasn't here. Tonight was about business, about appearances, about convincing powerful men and women that he was more than just a cold machine. The whispers had reached him months ago, rumors that Daniel Gray was incapable of love, that he was too broken, too consumed by grief to ever let someone in again. Normally, he ignored gossip, but this time he couldn't. Investors wanted to see stability. They wanted to believe the man leading them into the future had not only brains but balance, a life beyond contracts and boardrooms. And so Daniel had done something reckless, something wholly uncharacteristic. He had hired someone, not a business consultant, not a personal assistant, but a woman, a date for the night. He told himself it was just strategy. Appearances mattered. A partner at his side, even temporarily, would silence the rumors, reassure the investors, and keep the vultures at bay. It was nothing more than a performance. One night, one illusion. Then life would return to its rigid order, and then the ballroom doors opened. The air shifted as though the music itself paused to breathe her in. She stepped into the light, and suddenly every gaze turned, drawn as if by gravity. Clara Bennett. Daniel's eyes, trained to never reveal surprise, betrayed him for just a fraction of a second. She was not what he expected. Her gown was a deep midnight blue, shimmering like a night sky stitched with stars. The dress was elegant, yes, but it wasn't what made her unforgettable. It was her presence. She carried herself with a grace so natural it seemed effortless, yet with a warmth that cut through the icy grandeur of the room. Her hair fell in soft waves around her shoulders, her smile subtle yet alive, as though she wasn't trying to impress anyone at all, and somehow impressed everyone. Daniel's chest tightened unexpectedly. This was supposed to be simple, an arrangement, a role, but as Clara's eyes found his across the room, as she walked toward him with calm, unhurried confidence, he felt something shift inside him, something dangerous, something unplanned. When she reached him, she slipped her hand lightly through the crook of his arm, her touch warm against his sleeve. She tilted her head slightly, close enough for only him to hear, and whispered with a teasing softness, "Relax, Mr. Gray. Tonight you're not the CEO. Tonight you're just a man with a date." For a heartbeat, the mask cracked. Daniel, the man who never faltered, almost forgot how to breathe. The crowd admired. The cameras flashed. And somewhere beneath the polished surface of control, Daniel felt the faintest spark of something he hadn't allowed himself in years. Hope that ransom lies total, almost forgot how to breathe. The crowd admired. The cameras flashed for weeks, though in truth, it was their first time together. To the outside world, they were the perfect pair. His sharp, commanding presence balanced by her easy warmth. His restrained words softened by her light-hearted charm. Investors leaned in closer than usual. Journalists scribbled notes with renewed fascination, and rivals exchanged quiet glances that hinted at envy. Daniel knew he was playing a role. He always did. Yet something about tonight unsettled him. Clara didn't act the way he expected. She wasn't over-eager, nor was she stiffly professional. She didn't fuss over appearances, nor did she drown herself in rehearsed lines. She simply was. And that authenticity was unnerving. He couldn't decide if it was dangerous or refreshing. At the long banquet table surrounded by crystal glasses and plates of delicately arranged food, Clara leaned closer, lowering her voice so only he could hear. "Do you ever get tired of this?" Daniel arched a brow, pausing mid-sip of his wine. "Of what exactly?" She gestured subtly around the room. "All of it. The glitz, the politics, the endless pretending. People laugh too loudly, smile too widely, drink too quickly. Doesn't it ever feel exhausting?" For a moment, he simply stared at her. No one ever asked him that. No one dared. He had become accustomed to hollow flattery, to careful questions designed only to open doors to his business empire. But this was disarmingly honest. "You're not very good at playing the part," he murmured, almost amused. Clara smiled, not offended in the slightest. "That's probably true. I don't think I was born for masks." She leaned back slightly, her eyes scanning the room. "I just see people, that's all, even the ones who don't want to be seen." Her words lingered in his mind longer than they should have. He took another sip of his drink, hiding the way his lips twitched, dangerously close to a smile. And then, before he realized it, a laugh escaped him, a small one, but real. The sound startled him as much as it did her. He hadn't laughed like that in years, not in this kind of setting. "What?" Clara asked, tilting her head. "Nothing," Daniel said, shaking his head, though his voice held a note of warmth. "You're just different." For the first time that evening, he allowed himself to relax, if only slightly. They spoke more freely as the courses came and went, about books, about travel, about the little details of life that had nothing to do with business. She asked him about Emily, and instead of the standard polished answer he usually gave, he found himself telling real stories. He told her how Emily loved to paint, how her little fingers always ended up more colorful than the canvas, how she had memorized entire bedtime stories and liked to correct him when he skipped lines, how she thought she was sneaky when stealing cookies, though her crumbs always betrayed her. Clara listened intently, her face glowing with genuine interest. She wasn't pretending. She wasn't smiling just to be polite. She cared. And Daniel, for the first time in a long time, felt the dangerous warmth of connection. Then, just as he began to believe the evening would remain under control, the moment shattered. "Daddy," the single word, high and innocent, cut through the grandeur like a bell. Conversations paused. Heads turned. Daniel's blood ran cold as he looked up and saw her. Emily, his Emily, standing there in her pale yellow dress, curls bouncing as she hurried toward him, eyes wide and bright. Daniel's breath caught. He had left her at home with the nanny. She wasn't supposed to be here. But of course, Emily had always been clever, always had a way of finding him when he least expected it. Before he could react, Emily's gaze shifted. She saw Clara, and in that instant, in the way her small face lit up, Daniel felt the ground tilt beneath him. "Daddy," Emily said again, her voice carrying through the stunned silence of the room. "Is she my new mommy?" The whispers began almost instantly, rippling across the ballroom like waves. Daniel felt the burn of 100 eyes watching him, judging, waiting for his response. His throat tightened. He opened his mouth to explain, to undo the damage, to salvage the night before the gossip columns tore him apart. But Clara moved first. She knelt down, her gown flowing around her like a dark pool, and smiled at Emily with the gentleness of someone who understood the weight of a child's hope. "Hi," Clara said softly, as though the entire world wasn't listening. "I'm Clara. What's your name?" "Emily," the little girl replied, shy but curious. "Well, Emily," Clara said, extending her hand, "it's very nice to meet you." Emily's small fingers slid into Clara's without hesitation, and Daniel, standing frozen above them, saw something he hadn't expected to see in years, the spark of joy in his daughter's eyes, the kind of joy he thought had been lost with her mother. And for the first time that night, Daniel's carefully constructed world began to crack. The party slowly unraveled into the late hours, but Daniel could hardly remember the conversations he had afterward. The polite smiles, the congratulations, the whispers of curiosity, they blurred into background noise. His mind was elsewhere. His gaze kept slipping to the woman beside him and the little girl who clung to her hand as if she had known her forever. Every time Clara leaned down to listen to something Emily whispered, every time Emily's laughter rang like a bell in the middle of that glittering hall, Daniel's chest tightened in ways he could not name. This was not the plan. It was never supposed to go this far. When the last of the guests finally drifted out into the cool night, Daniel ordered the car. The black limousine pulled smoothly to the curb, and the three of them slipped inside. The driver closed the door with a muted thud, shutting out the noise of the city. Inside, there was only the hum of the engine, the faint glow of passing lights, and the quiet sound of Emily's breathing as she curled up, fast asleep, in Clara's lap. Daniel sat across from them, his posture stiff at first, but his eyes refused to move away. Clara held Emily gently, brushing a curl from her small forehead, rocking her without realizing she was doing it. It was an image that hit him harder than any business deal, harder than any loss he had endured. For a moment it looked right, too right. "This wasn't part of the plan," Daniel finally said, his voice low, almost rough. Clara looked up, meeting his gaze. What wasn't? He hesitated. He was not a man who stumbled over words, yet tonight he felt unsteady, as though the ground beneath him no longer belonged to him. He gestured vaguely, his hand cutting through the air. You, her, tonight, the way she looked at you. He let out a slow, unsteady breath. This was supposed to be simple. One night, one appearance, and now, his voice cracked for the first time in years. Now she looks at you like you've been here forever. Clara's expression softened. She looked down at Emily, who murmured something in her sleep, and pressed closer into her. Clara's hand rested protectively over the little girl's back. She's a wonderful child, she whispered, and wonderful children only ask for one thing, someone to stay. Daniel's throat tightened. He wanted to answer, wanted to explain, but for once words seemed useless. He had always been a man of control, a man of certainty. Yet now, watching his daughter cling to this woman as though her heart had already decided, he felt powerless and afraid. The car rolled to a gentle stop outside his penthouse. The driver opened the door, but neither Clara nor Daniel moved. Emily was still asleep, breathing softly, her small hand curled into the fabric of Clara's gown. The city lights spilled in through the open door, casting shadows that seemed to frame the three of them in some strange, fragile portrait. Daniel leaned forward, his voice barely above a whisper. Would you? Clara frowned slightly, confused. Would I what? Stay, he said, his eyes fixed on hers, no longer hiding behind the mask of the CEO. His voice trembled, raw and unguarded. Not for her, not just for tonight, for me, for us. Silence filled the car. The hum of the city faded. For a long moment, Clara just looked at him, really looked at him. Past the suits, past the wealth, past the carefully built armor. She saw the man beneath it all, tired, lonely, desperate to give his daughter the world but terrified of giving his own heart away again. Her gaze softened, and slowly, her hand tightened around Emily as though she was answering without words. I don't know what the future looks like, she said honestly, but I know one thing. When she looked at me tonight, I didn't see a stranger's child. I saw a little girl I wanted to protect. Daniel swallowed hard. His chest felt heavy, but for once it wasn't with grief. It was with something new, something fragile but alive. Emily stirred then, her small voice breaking through the silence, soft and drowsy. Daddy, she rubbed her eyes, then looked at Clara with sleepy trust. Can she stay forever? The words pierced him straight through. He couldn't speak. He couldn't breathe. He could only look at Clara, his eyes asking the question he had been too afraid to voice. Clara smiled faintly, her eyes glistening. She brushed a strand of hair from Emily's forehead and looked back at Daniel. She didn't give him a promise. She didn't give him a contract. But the way she nodded, the way she let her hand rest gently in his when he reached for it, it was enough. In that moment, Daniel realized something he had fought against for years. Life wasn't about perfection. It wasn't about appearances. It wasn't even about control. It was about moments like this, unexpected, messy, unplanned moments where hearts collided and something new was born. Not an arrangement, not a performance, but the fragile beginning of a family.